Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. In today's video, I'm going to cover the 5 areas that I felt underprepared for when I started the role, and these are pain points that I feel pretty much every day, and I've been a new grad developer for the last 4 months or so. So let's get started. First subject area that I want to talk about is DevOps. It seems like nowadays every developer is expected to have some working knowledge of modern DevOps. And in my experience in undergrad, they didn't expose me to that at all. So I didn't even have exposure to Git from the classroom, though I did have some thanks to my internships. So to this day, I still have to Google Git commands here and there. And additionally, for me, setting up the CI/CD pipeline for my application was quite a headache. Now it varies team by team or what project you're on, because in many cases this may be already set up for you, but in my case it was certainly a lot of learning and a pretty big headache overall. Additionally, everything's moving towards containerization in the cloud, so if you were to study or self-study containerization or maybe like Docker or Kubernetes, I think it would be really beneficial for when you enter the workforce. I thankfully have been able to get by just by using OpenShift's source to image, so I'm able to containerize my application without actually really knowing what goes on under the hood. Another challenge is writing applications for scale, and this is never ever a problem in college, or at least it wasn't for me, because I would just submit my project or assignments, they weren't deployed anywhere, and I definitely didn't have to worry about too many people using it at once. In addition, you could kind of get away with some minor inefficiencies in code, because chances are you're not going to be passing enough through your application for it to be apparent, as well as you're not going to have a formal code review. Writing applications for scale definitely posed a little bit of a challenge, and it still does for me. An example of that is session management. So I've just been used to just using Express Session, for example, and just storing session in memory, whereas obviously in a deployed situation in a cluster environment, a user might sign in on one node, and then due to load management, they might be on a replica in a different cluster, a whole separate node, and then the state doesn't match up since they were authenticated on a different one. So that's just an example of a case where I fell victim to not being used to writing applications for scale. So that leads me into my third challenge area, and that is just working in the backend in general. It really wows me how I was basically taught nothing about server-side development at all in undergrad. I have a whole video about what computer science at UNC was like, but I do feel like this is an area they massively neglect. I did write a very simple FTP server and client in my computer networking class, but that was so simple it had no real-world applicability. Something else about working on the backend that is challenging for me is authentication, and that's just a whole beast that I never learned or was exposed to at all in my undergrad class, even with a Intro to Security Concepts class. And the fourth challenge is just working with databases. It's one thing to just query a database, but there's a lot more work that goes into managing a database that kind of goes unaccounted for in undergrad. So for example, you have to deal with database design, picking a right plan since these things aren't free, setting up a test database for your test environment. You have to do sysadmin stuff like and worry about security with views, and maybe you have to prepare for rollbacks, so you have to have save points. There's just a lot more that goes into working with a database than I thought. Another thing that was really instrumental for my applications was implementing connection pooling. That's something they never really taught at all in undergrad, and that drastically improved the speed at which my application could communicate with the database. So in general, I think I've learned a lot in just working with databases. And the last one is about establishing a technical network. It's definitely difficult, or the problem is definitely exacerbated thanks to coronavirus and work from home. But it can definitely be difficult at times to know who to go to when you're having problems on something and no one on your team can help. I think that will probably be mitigated with time as just you get to know more people, and if we ever go back into the office, I'm sure that would help. But also when you're an intern, everybody wants to help you and they kind of go out of their way to make sure that you're getting the help you need. But when you're a full-time employee, that really isn't the case, so you kind of have to actively look for help when you need it. I also know that in terms of promotions, leadership wants people that have technical eminence, and it's pretty hard to establish that when you're a new hire, and it's hard to stand out as a potential leader or something like that, and that's something I'm still trying to figure out, I think. Okay, so those are the challenges that I've been facing as a new grad hire, and I'm sure other new grads in the same position probably face similar challenges as well. Hopefully these will become mitigated over time, but I just thought it might be interesting to share some of these challenges with you guys now as I progress through my career. Thanks.